before Auschwitz, before Treblinka, before the names the world would one day fear. There was a place designed to perfect terror. Just outside Berlin, within sight of ordinary German life, the Nazis built a camp not to hide their cruelty, but to refine it. This was Sachsenhausen. Here, suffering was organized, measured, and taught. Every gate, every barrack, every punishment was carefully planned, not as chaos, but as policy. Prisoners did not enter this camp to disappear quietly. They entered to be broken, studied, disciplined, and used as examples. Guards were trained here. Commandants learned here. Methods of control were tested here, then exported across an entire continent. If you want to understand how the Holocaust became possible, you don't start at the end. You start here, at the place where terror was turned into a system, and cruelty became routine. Chapter 1. The camp that set the standard. The gates open with mechanical precision. Gravel crunches under boots. Orders are shouted, clipped, practiced, rehearsed until they sound effortless. Prisoners stand frozen in lines, so straight they resemble architecture rather than people. Above them, a single watchtower stares down at the entire camp, its windows dark, unreadable. This is not chaos. This is design. From the very first step inside Sachsenhausen, nothing is accidental, and nothing is humane. In the summer of 1936, as Berlin prepared to host the Olympic Games and present a polished image of a reborn Germany to the world, the Nazi leadership quietly built something very different just north of the capital. In Oranienburg, a quiet town surrounded by pine forests and waterways, the SS broke ground on what they intended to be the perfect concentration camp. Not the first, but the most refined. A place where terror would be standardized, controlled, and taught. The choice of Oranienburg was deliberate. It was close enough to Berlin to remain under constant inspection by the SS leadership, yet far enough to keep suffering hidden behind trees and fences. Trains could reach it easily. Prisoners could disappear quickly. And above all, its location sent a message. This system of repression was not a secret on the fringes of the Reich. It stood at its very doorstep. Sachsenhausen was conceived as a prototype, a model, a blueprint. Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, wanted a camp that embodied Nazi ideology in concrete and steel. Order over chaos. Discipline over humanity. Power expressed not only through violence, but through structure. Every later camp would borrow from what was built here. The layout alone revealed its purpose. Unlike earlier camps that grew haphazardly, Sachsenhausen was drawn with a ruler. A triangular design radiated outward from a single focal point, the roll call square. From one spot, a single guard could observe thousands of prisoners at once. Barracks fanned out like spokes of a wheel, each one identical, each one exposed. Privacy did not exist. Surveillance was constant. At the apex stood Tower A, the administrative heart of the camp. Its windows overlooked everything. Its gate marked the boundary between the outside world and a reality governed by entirely different rules. Inscribed above the entrance were words promising work and discipline. What waited inside was something far more permanent. The SS who staffed Sachsenhausen were not merely guards. They were trainees. This camp served as a school for terror. Officers learned how to command, how to punish, how to extract obedience through fear alone. Procedures were written, tested, refined. What worked was recorded. What broke prisoners fastest was repeated. Even the routines were engineered. Roll calls lasted for hours, regardless of weather. Rain soaked clothing until it clung to skin. Winter winds cut through thin fabric and hollow bodies. Prisoners learned quickly that time itself had become a weapon. Hunger gnawed constantly. Fatigue settled into bones. The body weakened, and with it, resistance. From the beginning, Sachsenhausen presented itself as orderly and modern. Clean lines, regulated schedules, efficient administration. To outsiders, and even to some within the regime, it appeared controlled rather than brutal. But this appearance was part of the deception. Terror here did not need to be chaotic. It was systematic. Punishment was never random. It was instructional. Beatings were public. Humiliations were staged. Prisoners were forced to watch others suffer, learning the consequences of disobedience without a word needing to be spoken. Fear spread faster than violence ever could. The first prisoners were political enemies of the regime. Communists, social democrats, trade unionists, men who had dared to oppose the Nazis before their grip on power was complete. Many arrived believing their detention would be temporary. They were wrong. Sachsenhausen was not built for rehabilitation. It was built to erase opposition. Each man was stripped of identity upon arrival. Names replaced by numbers. Hair shaved. Clothing exchanged for uniforms that marked them as less than human. The smell of disinfectant mixed with sweat and fear. The sound of barking dogs echoed through the compound. The message was unmistakable. You do not belong to yourself anymore. The SS refined hierarchy within the prisoner population itself. Certain inmates were given authority over others, turning survival into a moral trap. Obey, and you might live longer. Resist, and punishment would be swift. The system encouraged betrayal, distrust, and isolation. Solidarity became dangerous. From Sachsenhausen, orders flowed outward. Camp regulations written here would be adopted elsewhere. Guard training methods tested here would be replicated across Germany and, later, across occupied Europe. This camp was not an endpoint. It was a starting line. By design, Sachsenhausen existed in plain sight. Smoke rose above the trees. Trains arrived and departed. Local residents could not claim ignorance. Terror did not hide in shadows. It stood behind fences, normalized by routine. The camp's modernity extended to its record-keeping. Everything was documented. Transfers, punishments, deaths. Bureaucracy gave violence a paper trail, allowing mass cruelty to function smoothly. Killing was not yet industrialized, but the mindset was already in place. For the SS leadership, Sachsenhausen was proof of concept. Here, they demonstrated that a population could be controlled completely through structure, fear, and exhaustion. That morality could be stripped away, not in a frenzy, but through repetition. The camp expanded quickly. New barracks rose. New prisoners arrived. Each edition refined the system further. Sachsenhausen was no longer an experiment. It was a functioning model, and the Reich was watching. And yet, this was only the beginning. What was built here would not remain contained within these fences. The methods perfected at Sachsenhausen would soon spread, multiplied by war, radicalized by ideology, and pushed to limits even this camp had not yet reached. Chapter 2. From Oranienburg to Sachsenhausen. The birth of an SS camp. The trucks arrived before dawn, their engines low and steady, cutting through the morning fog that hangs over Oranienburg like a hell breath. Prisoners are pulled from cramped compartments, blinking against the pale light, their boots sinking slightly into damp earth. The air smells of pine, wet soil, and fear. Guards shout orders that sound rehearsed, almost bored. This is not an improvised operation. It is a transfer, a transition. Something old is being discarded, and something far more dangerous is being born. Before Sachsenhausen, there was Oranienburg concentration camp, established in the earliest months of Nazi rule. It was crude, violent, and chaotic. Local SA units ran it with little oversight. Beatings were frequent, killings were impulsive, and discipline varied depending on who happened to be in charge that day. For the SS leadership, this kind of uncontrolled brutality was no longer acceptable. Terror, they believed, had to be efficient. By the mid-1930s, Heinrich Himmler was determined to wrest full control of the concentration camp system away from the SA and local authorities. Camps were no longer meant to be temporary holding pens for political enemies. They were becoming instruments of ideological enforcement, tools to reshape society through fear. To do that, the SS needed a camp that reflected their values: discipline, hierarchy, and absolute obedience. Oranienburg, the old camp, was dismantled piece by piece. Prisoners were marched north, guarded closely, their uncertainty thick as the mist around them. They did not yet know that they were being moved into a system designed to last. Sachsenhausen was rising from the ground nearby, its foundations already laid with mathematical precision. From the moment the SS took over, everything changed. Authority was centralized. Command structures were clarified. The camp commandant answered directly to SS leadership in Berlin. Orders flowed downward without interference. This was no longer a local terror project. It was a national one. The SS guards assigned to Sachsenhausen were selected carefully. Many were young, ideologically committed, and eager to prove themselves. They were trained not only to enforce rules, but to embody them. Discipline among guards was as rigid as discipline imposed on prisoners. Cruelty was not only permitted, it was expected, as long as it followed protocol. Arrival procedures were standardized. Prisoners were registered, searched, stripped, shaved, and issued uniforms in a process designed to overwhelm the senses. The sound of clippers buzzed relentlessly. Hair fell to the floor. Personal belongings vanished into storage rooms, rarely to be seen again. Identity dissolved in stages. From the beginning, Sachsenhausen was divided into clear zones of power. Administrative buildings stood clean and orderly, their walls freshly painted, their floors swept daily. Beyond them lay the barracks, overcrowded and damp, smelling of unwashed bodies and sickness. This contrast was intentional. It reinforced hierarchy, not just socially, but spatially. The SS leadership wanted the camp to function like a machine. Every role was defined, every task assigned. Guards rotated shifts with precision. Prisoner labor was scheduled down to the minute. Even punishment followed written procedures. Violence was no longer impulsive. It was regulated. Political prisoners continued to arrive in large numbers. Many were veterans of resistance movements who had already endured interrogations, beatings, and imprisonment. Some believed they could survive Sachsenhausen through discipline and endurance. Others recognized immediately that this camp was different. There was no visible chaos here to exploit. No cracks in authority. Everything worked. The SS used Sachsenhausen to refine psychological domination. Prisoners were forced to stand at attention for hours without explanation. Silence was enforced suddenly, then broken by shouting. Rules changed without warning. Stability itself became a luxury denied. Confusion weakened resistance more effectively than constant brutality. Hierarchy among prisoners was formalized. Certain inmates were assigned supervisory roles, creating layers of power within the camp population. This fractured solidarity. Trust eroded. Survival became individual, not collective. The SS observed these dynamics closely, learning how control could be outsourced to the oppressed themselves. Sachsenhausen also served as a showcase. High-ranking Nazi officials toured the camp. They observed routines, inspected facilities, and praised efficiency. To them, this was not a place of suffering, but of success. Proof that ideological enemies could be neutralized without disorder. As the SS consolidated power, Sachsenhausen became a training ground. Future commandants of camps like Buchenwald, Dachau, and later Auschwitz passed through here. They studied its systems. They absorbed its culture. Sachsenhausen did not merely imprison victims. It produced perpetrators. The camp's proximity to Berlin reinforced its importance. Reports traveled quickly. Inspections were frequent. Failures were corrected immediately. Sachsenhausen was under constant scrutiny, ensuring that its methods remained sharp, effective, and exportable. Violence escalated in calculated ways. Punishments were introduced, tested, adjusted. Floggings were timed. Solitary confinement was measured. Death was not yet the primary objective, but it was always close, hovering as an unspoken consequence. By the late 1930s, Sachsenhausen had replaced Oranienburg completely. The old camp faded from memory. Its successor stood stronger, cleaner, and infinitely more lethal in potential. The SS had succeeded in building a camp that reflected their vision of control. What began as a transfer had become a transformation. The camp system was no longer a blunt instrument. It was precise, professional, dangerous, and Sachsenhausen stood at its center, quietly shaping what would come next. The prisoners sensed it, even if they could not yet name it. The routines felt permanent. The fences felt final. This was not a place designed to hold enemies temporarily. It was a place designed to endure. And as the Reich expanded, as war loomed on the horizon, Sachsenhausen was ready. The model was complete. All that remained was to apply it on a scale the world had never seen. Chapter 3: Architecture of Control, Designing Obedience and Death. The first thing prisoners notice is the geometry. Not the guards, not the dogs, not even the barbed wire humming faintly with electricity. It is the shape. Clean lines cut through the earth with unnatural precision, as if the ground itself has been disciplined. From the moment a prisoner steps through the main gate, the camp reveals its true language. This place does not scream chaos. It whispers certainty. Everything here has been measured, aligned, and calculated to dominate the human mind. Sachsenhausen was not built to grow organically. It was drawn on paper long before the first prisoner arrived. Architects and SS planners worked together to translate ideology into physical space. The result was a triangular layout unlike any camp before it, a design meant to concentrate power in a single point while exposing everyone else beneath it. At the heart of this geometry lay the roll call square, a vast, open expanse of gravel where thousands of prisoners would be assembled, counted, and broken day after day. From this central square, barracks radiated outward like spokes on a wheel. No corner was hidden. No shadow offered refuge. Every doorway faced inward, toward authority. The arrangement ensured that prisoners were never oriented toward freedom, only toward surveillance. Even standing still, they were being watched. At the apex of the triangle rose Tower A. It was more than a watchtower. It was the camp's eye. From its windows, guards could observe nearly the entire compound without moving a step. The tower housed the gate, the administration, and the command nerve center. Its position was symbolic and practical. Power stood above everything else, both literally and psychologically. When prisoners stood on a roll call square, they could feel it. Eyes from above. The sensation of exposure pressed against the skin. Wind swept across the open ground with no obstruction, carrying the smell of damp gravel, sweat, and fear. In winter, the cold settled into joints and bones. In summer, the sun beat down relentlessly. There was no escape, no shade, no mercy in the design. This architecture turned routine into torture. Roll calls could last hours. Prisoners stood motionless while bodies swayed, collapsed, or died where they stood. The guards did not rush. Time itself had been weaponized. The square was not merely a gathering place. It was an instrument. Beyond the barracks stretched fences layered with lethal intent. Barbed wire, electrified wire, clear zones of gravel designed to reveal footprints. Watchtowers stood at intervals, each overlapping the field of vision of the next. There were no blind spots. Any movement toward the perimeter was instantly visible. Escape was not merely difficult. It was engineered to be nearly impossible. The camp roads were laid out with equal precision. Straight, wide paths allowed guards to move quickly and prisoners to march efficiently. These routes became arteries of control, directing human traffic exactly where the SS wanted it to flow. Even walking was regulated. Even standing was regulated. The camp dictated posture, pace, and direction. Inside the barracks, the order continued. Beds were arranged with military symmetry. Blankets folded to exact dimensions. Shoes placed beneath bunks at precise angles. Inspections were frequent and unforgiving. A crooked blanket could lead to punishment. Disorder was treated as defiance. This obsession with order served a deeper purpose. It trained prisoners to police themselves. Fear of punishment enforced compliance even when guards were not present. Over time, the camp's rules embedded themselves into muscle memory. Obedience became instinctive. The SS understood that terror did not need to be loud. In Sachsenhausen, terror was quiet, persistent, and omnipresent. The layout ensured that prisoners could never forget where they were or who held power. Every sight line pointed inward. Every structure reinforced hierarchy. Even the ground beneath their feet played a role. Gravel crunched loudly, making stealth impossible. Footsteps announced themselves. Silence became rare. Sound traveled easily across open spaces, carrying shouts, commands, and the distant crack of gunfire. The camp's design also served administrative efficiency. Guards could count prisoners quickly. Movements could be tracked. Labor detachments could be assembled and dispatched without confusion. Sachsenhausen was meant to function smoothly, like a factory of control. And like any factory, it had zones for different functions. Living quarters, work areas, punishment zones, execution sites concealed behind walls or trees. Each space was isolated yet connected, allowing the SS to escalate violence without disrupting the overall order. The psychological effect was immediate and lasting. Prisoners learned that resistance had nowhere to hide, that individuality had no space to exist. The camp itself seemed to participate in their oppression, closing in around them with every step. This design was not accidental, nor was it unique to Sachsenhausen alone. It was intended to be copied. Architects and SS officials documented every detail. Measurements were recorded. Diagrams circulated. The camp became a living manual. Future camps would borrow its principles. Centralized surveillance, radiating barracks, clear zones of death. Sachsenhausen was the prototype not only in spirit, but in structure. For the SS, this architecture proved something essential. That domination could be built. That cruelty could be stabilized through design. That human beings could be controlled not just by violence, but by space itself. Prisoners felt it in ways they could not always articulate. A constant pressure in the chest, a sense of being permanently exposed, the absence of corners to retreat into, physically or mentally. Even dreams were invaded by the camp's geometry. At night, floodlights illuminated the perimeter. Shadows stretched long and sharp. The hum of electricity vibrated faintly through the air. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by whistles, barking dogs, and shouted commands. The camp never fully slept. Neither did its prisoners. Sachsenhausen's design erased distance between authority and punishment. From Tower A, orders could be given and enforced almost instantly. This speed made resistance futile. By the time a thought formed, it was already too late. The camp did not rely solely on brutality to break people. It relied on inevitability, on the sense that everything had been accounted for, every movement anticipated, that no matter what one did, the system would absorb it and continue. This was architecture as ideology, concrete and steel transformed into doctrine, a physical manifestation of Nazi beliefs about order, hierarchy, and domination. And as Sachsenhausen functioned day after day, the SS saw confirmation of their vision. The camp worked. It controlled. It endured. It produced obedience. But the design did more than confine prisoners. It trained those who ran it. Guards learned how space could be used as a weapon, how structure amplified power, how fear could be embedded into walls and fences. What stood here was not simply a prison. It was a blueprint for a future of camps that would stretch across Europe, each one refining and expanding what Sachsenhausen had begun. The prisoners did not yet know how far this model would spread. They only knew that this place felt permanent, intentional, and terrifyingly complete. And as the camp continued to operate with chilling efficiency, its architecture silently prepared the ground for something even darker, something that would move beyond control and into annihilation. Chapter 4. Marked for Exclusion. Who the Nazis imprisoned. They arrive in waves, not all at once, but steadily, relentlessly, each transport adding new faces to the roll call square. Some stumble from beatings suffered before they ever reach the gate. Others stand upright, still clinging to the belief that this is a mistake, a misunderstanding that will soon be corrected. The camp does not care which hope they carry. Sachsenhausen swallows them all the same. At first glance, the prisoners appear similar. Shaved heads. Identical uniforms. Numbers sewn where names once belonged. But beneath this forced uniformity, the Nazis have already divided them, categorized them, defined their worth, or lack of it, according to ideology that leaves no room for humanity. In the earliest years, Sachsenhausen is filled primarily with political prisoners. Communists, social democrats, trade union leaders, journalists, intellectuals. Men who had opposed the Nazi Party when opposition was still possible. Many have been arrested multiple times since 1933, released, rearrested, warned, and finally removed from society altogether. Sachsenhausen is meant to end their resistance permanently. These men arrive with memories of political meetings, underground pamphlets, whispered conversations in cafes. Inside the camp, those memories become dangerous. Even glancing at another prisoner too long can draw suspicion. Guards watch constantly, alert for signs of organization. The SS understands that ideas are harder to kill than bodies. Soon, new categories begin to appear. Jehovah's Witnesses arrive, their crime not political opposition, but refusal. They will not swear loyalty to Hitler. They will not serve in the military. They will not renounce their faith. The SS sees them as stubborn, defiant, and dangerous in their own quiet way. Yet unlike others, they are sometimes offered a way out. Sign a declaration of loyalty, and you may leave. Many refuse. Their faith becomes a sentence. Criminal prisoners are transferred from German prisons, marked differently, treated differently, and often placed above others in the camp hierarchy. The SS uses them as tools, granting authority in exchange for obedience. Violence becomes privatized. Abuse spreads horizontally as well as downward. Sachsenhausen teaches prisoners to fear not only guards, but one another. Then there are those labeled as social, a word deliberately vague. Homeless men, alcoholics, the unemployed, people deemed unwilling or unable to conform to Nazi expectations of productivity and discipline. Their presence in Sachsenhausen sends a warning to the German population beyond the fences. Failure to fit the mold will not be tolerated. Homosexual men are arrested under intensified enforcement of existing laws, their identities reduced to a pink triangle stitched onto their uniforms. They are isolated, abused, and often targeted for the most degrading labor. Guards treat them with open contempt. Fellow prisoners, conditioned by fear and prejudice, often follow suit. Survival becomes even more difficult. Roma and Sinti prisoners begin to arrive as Nazi racial ideology hardens. Families are torn apart. Men are imprisoned first, often without explanation. The camp records list them as racial enemies, not individuals. Their treatment reflects the growing shift from repression to racial persecution. Jewish prisoners arrive sporadically at first. Early arrests are often tied to political activity or accusations of economic crimes. But everything changes after Kristallnacht. In November of 1938, thousands of Jewish men are arrested across Germany and sent to camps like Sachsenhausen. Many arrive still smelling of smoke, their synagogues destroyed, their homes looted. They are beaten immediately, relentlessly. Guards make clear that their imprisonment is not temporary. Release, when it comes, is conditional on emigration, property seizure, and humiliation. Sachsenhausen becomes a pressure chamber, forcing Jews to flee Germany if they can, while stripping them of dignity and resources. Each prisoner category is marked by a colored triangle sewn onto the uniform. Red for political prisoners, green for criminals, purple for Jehovah's Witnesses, pink for homosexuals, black for those deemed asocial, brown for Roma, yellow for Jews, often combined with other triangles to indicate multiple offenses. These symbols reduce complex human lives to simple visual cues. They dictate treatment, punishment, and survival chances. The system works because it is visible. Guards do not need to ask questions. Prisoners do not need to speak. A glance at a uniform tells a story the SS has already written. Hierarchy becomes immediate and unavoidable. As the camp population grows, nationalities expand. Prisoners from Austria arrive after the Anschluss. Later, men from occupied territories will follow. Languages mix in the barracks, creating confusion and isolation. Communication becomes difficult. Solidarity becomes fragile. The SS exploits these divisions expertly. Certain groups are pitted against others. Privileges are distributed unevenly. Food rations vary. Labor assignments differ. Resentment grows. Unity dissolves. Sachsenhausen becomes a social experiment in fragmentation. For the guards, categorization simplifies cruelty. It allows them to justify abuse as policy rather than choice. They are not beating a man. They are disciplining a political enemy. They are not starving a person. They are correcting a social element. Language shields conscience. Prisoners feel the weight of these labels constantly. They shape interactions, expectations, and risks. A political prisoner might hope for solidarity. A Jewish prisoner learns quickly that hope invites punishment. A criminal prisoner may gain power, but at the cost of becoming part of the system that destroys others. Yet despite these divisions, moments of recognition still occur. A shared glance during roll call, a whispered warning, a piece of bread slipped quietly from one hand to another. These moments are dangerous, fleeting, and precious. As years pass, Sachsenhausen's population reflects the radicalization of Nazi policy. The camp is no longer just a place for enemies of the state. It becomes a dumping ground for anyone the regime deems undesirable. Ideology expands. Categories multiply. Mercy disappears. By the eve of war, Sachsenhausen holds thousands of men marked not for what they have done, but for who they are. The camp has succeeded in translating Nazi belief into lived reality. Difference has been criminalized. Identity has become a sentence. The prisoners sense the shift. Arrests are no longer explained. Releases become rare. Violence intensifies without warning. Something is changing, something moving toward a scale they cannot yet fully grasp. Sachsenhausen, once a model of repression, is evolving into something darker. The categories that divide its prisoners are hardening into destinies. And as Europe edges closer to war, the camp prepares to absorb a flood of new victims, each one carrying a different story, each one about to be reduced to the same cold calculation of worth and expendability. Chapter 5. Daily Life Inside the Model Camp. Morning does not begin with light. It begins with sound. A whistle cuts through the darkness, sharp and merciless, followed by shouting that leaves no room for hesitation. Men jolt awake from shallow sleep, bodies stiff from cold and hunger, minds fogged by exhaustion. There is no gradual return to consciousness here. Awareness is forced, violent, immediate. Within seconds, prisoners are scrambling from bunks, pulling on threadbare uniforms still damp from sweat or rain, knowing that every second lost will be punished. The barracks smell of unwashed bodies, stale bread, and sickness. Air barely circulates. Breath hangs heavy, especially in winter, when frost creeps along wooden walls and settles on blankets like ash. In summer, the heat presses down, thick and suffocating, turning the interior into a box of trapped breath and despair. Lice crawl through seams. Coughs echo in the darkness. Somewhere, someone retches quietly, trying not to be noticed. Outside, the camp reveals itself again in harsh clarity. Gravel crunches beneath boots as prisoners rush into formation. The roll call square waits, vast and unforgiving. Wind cuts across the open space, carrying the metallic tang of the fences and the distant bark of dogs. Prisoners line up in rows so precise they appear drawn on ground. Heads forward, hands at sides, silence enforced. Roll call can last minutes or hours. No one knows which it will be. The SS counts and recounts, correcting errors, sometimes inventing them. If a number is wrong, the entire formation remains standing. Men sway. Knees buckle. Those who fall are beaten or dragged aside, sometimes left where they collapse, bodies slowly cooling against the stones. Hunger gnaws constantly. Breakfast, if it can be called that, is a thin liquid meant to resemble coffee, warm but empty, followed by a small piece of bread, so dense it feels heavier than it should. Prisoners learn to eat slowly, stretching the moment, trying to trick their bodies into believing this is enough. It never is. After roll call, work begins. Labor assignments vary, but all are exhausting. Some prisoners march out under guard to construction sites, quarries, workshops, or surrounding industrial projects. Others remain inside the camp, cleaning latrines, repairing buildings, hauling supplies. There is no such thing as light work. Every task is designed to drain strength, to remind the prisoner that their body no longer belongs to them. Tools are often inadequate or deliberately inefficient. Shovels with broken handles, wheelbarrows with warped wheels. Work is not about productivity. It is about obedience. Prisoners are beaten for working too slowly, and beaten again for working too fast. The rules shift without warning. Survival depends on anticipating the mood of guards who do not see prisoners as human. Time stretches unnaturally. Hours blur together under the weight of repetition. Muscles ache. Hands blister and split. Blood mixes with dirt. The body adapts, then fails. Injuries are common. Medical care is scarce and often dangerous. To be sick is to risk selection, punishment, or worse. Lunch offers little relief. A watery soup, sometimes with floating scraps of vegetables or grain, sometimes with nothing at all. Prisoners crowd around bowls, careful not to spill a single drop. The smell is thin and metallic. It fills the stomach briefly, then vanishes, leaving hunger sharper than before. Afternoons drag on. Fatigue becomes a constant hum beneath consciousness. Guards shout. Dogs snap at heels. Any mistake can trigger violence. A dropped tool, a crooked line, a glance interpreted as defiance. Punishments are swift and public, reinforcing the lesson that safety does not exist. Inside the camp, routine is relentless. Everything follows a schedule, but nothing feels predictable. This uncertainty is intentional. It keeps prisoners off balance, anxious, compliant. Even the smallest deviation can bring consequences. Even obedience does not guarantee safety. As evening approaches, prisoners return to the camp in columns, dragging their bodies behind them. Faces are hollow. Eyes stare forward, unfocused. The roll call square fills again. Counts are repeated. Deaths during the day must be accounted for. Sometimes bodies are dragged into formation to be counted among the living. Dinner is barely distinguishable from lunch. Another thin soup. Another piece of bread, sometimes smaller than the morning ration. Hunger becomes an identity, a constant companion that shapes thought and behavior. Men dream of food, talk about food, measure time by meals that never satisfy. Inside the barracks, the struggle continues. Space is limited. Bunks are stacked tightly, forcing bodies close together. Privacy is non-existent. Night offers no true rest. Coughing, whispering, crying, and the sounds of pain seep through the darkness. Guards patrol outside, boots striking rhythmically against the ground. Sanitation is primitive. Latrines overflow. Disease spreads quickly. Dysentery, typhus, infections take hold. Weakness is contagious. Those who follow become burdens, targets. Fear of sickness competes with fear of punishment. Yet within this daily grind, moments of humanity persist. A whispered warning about a brutal guard, a shared crust of bread, a quiet word of encouragement passed between bunks. These moments are fleeting, dangerous, and precious. They are acts of resistance in a system designed to crush solidarity. The SS watches everything. Informers are rewarded. Trust is risky. Prisoners learn to read faces, to listen for changes in tone, to survive through caution and restraint. Emotions are suppressed. Anger is swallowed. Grief is postponed indefinitely. Punishment is woven into daily life. Floggings take place near the roll call square. Prisoners are forced to watch. The crack of the whip echoes. Screams rise, then fade. The lesson is clear. This can happen to anyone. Sachsenhausen's routines are efficient because they are repetitive. Day after day, The same motions, the same hunger, the same fear. Time loses meaning. Weeks blur into months. Survival becomes the only measure of success. For the SS, this daily rhythm is proof of control. The camp runs on schedule. Prisoners move when ordered. Resistance is minimal. The system appears stable, effective. The suffering it produces is invisible in reports and statistics. But beneath the surface, bodies are breaking. Minds are fraying. The camp consumes people slowly, deliberately. Death is not always immediate. Often it is gradual, arriving through exhaustion, disease, and despair. As night deepens, prisoners lie awake, staring at the darkness, listening to the distant hum of electricity in the fences, the occasional shout from a tower, the barking of dogs. Sleep comes in fragments, haunted by fear and hunger. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after that. This is daily life inside the model camp, a routine designed not to kill quickly, but to destroy completely. And as Sachsenhausen continues to perfect this rhythm of suffering, the SS prepares to push the camp further, turning daily existence into something even more punishing, even more calculated, as labor and exploitation begin to dominate every waking hour. Chapter 6: Forced Labor and the Economics of Terror. The march begins before the sun has fully risen. Columns of prisoners move through the gate in rigid formation, boots striking the ground in uneven rhythm. Some limp, some stumble. Guards walk alongside them, rifles slung casually, dogs straining at their leashes. The air is sharp, smelling of damp earth and smoke. This is not transfer. This is extraction. Human bodies leaving the camp each morning, not to be rehabilitated, but to be consumed. At Sachsenhausen, labor is not incidental to punishment. It is central to it. From the earliest days, the SS understands that forced labor can serve two purposes at once. It can break prisoners physically and psychologically, and it can generate profit, materials, and power for the regime. Suffering here is not wasted. It is monetized. The work assignments vary, but all are brutal. Some prisoners are sent to construction sites, hauling bricks, mixing concrete, erecting buildings that will house future inmates. Others are marched to nearby brickworks, where clay dust coats lungs and skin, turning sweat into paste. Each breath burns. Each movement drains what little strength remains. The Sachsenhausen brickworks are among the most lethal labor sites connected to the camp. Prisoners work long hours under constant supervision, lifting heavy loads again and again until arms shake uncontrollably. Guards watch closely, not to ensure safety, but to enforce pace. Falling behind invites blows. Collapsing invites worse. Inside the camp, workshops hum with activity. Tailoring units stitch uniforms. Shoemakers repair boots. Metalworkers fabricate parts. The work is repetitive, exhausting, and relentless. Prisoners are given quotas impossible to meet on starvation rations. Failure is treated as sabotage. Punishment follows. The SS presents this system as discipline through work. In reality, it is exploitation stripped of pretense. Prisoners are not paid. They are not protected. They are replaceable. When one body fails, another takes its place. Labor is extracted until there is nothing left to give. Sachsenhausen also becomes a hub for SS-owned companies. Firms tied directly to the SS leadership profit from prisoner labor, supplying materials for construction projects across the Reich. Contracts are signed. Profits are recorded. The camp's suffering is translated into balance sheets and reports. This economic function reshapes the camp's priorities. Prisoners who can work are kept alive longer, not out of mercy, but out of utility. Those who cannot keep pace are discarded. Selection happens quietly, constantly. A limp, a cough, a moment of hesitation. These become death sentences. The workday stretches endlessly. Morning roll call bleeds into labor. Labor bleeds into evening roll call. Time is measured not by clocks, but by pain. Hands blister and crack. Backs bend permanently. Hunger sharpens with every passing hour. Guards enforce discipline with casual cruelty. a misplaced tool, a dropped brick, a pause to catch breath. Any of these can trigger violence. Whips crack, rifles strike, dogs lunge. The work continues regardless. Blood stains the ground and is absorbed without comment. The march back to the camp is often worse than the march out. Bodies are depleted. Feet drag. The sun sets, casting long shadows that stretch across the road. Some prisoners do not return. They are left behind, beaten where they fall, or shot as examples. Inside the camp, the roll call square fills again. Numbers must match. If someone is missing, the formation stands until the discrepancy is resolved. Sometimes the missing are dead, their bodies dragged into line to be counted. Death does not excuse absence. The SS uses forced labor as a teaching tool. New prisoners learn quickly that survival depends on appearing useful. Skills become currency. A trained carpenter, a machinist, a clerk who can read and write. These prisoners may be spared the worst assignments, at least temporarily. But usefulness is fragile. An injury erases it. Sickness destroys it. Age diminishes it. No one is secure. The system thrives on uncertainty, forcing prisoners to compete for survival while knowing it can be taken away at any moment. Outside the camp, German civilians see columns of prisoners marching to work sites. Some look away. Some stare. Some grow accustomed to the sight. Forced labor becomes normalized, woven into daily life beyond the fences. The camp's violence seeps into the surrounding world. The SS leadership views this as success. Sachsenhausen demonstrates that a camp can be self-sustaining, even profitable. That terror can be organized into an economic model. Reports praise efficiency. Productivity figures are circulated. Human cost is absent from the calculations. As Germany rearms and prepares for war, the demand for labor increases. Sachsenhausen expands its work detachments. Prisoners are pushed harder, worked longer, fed less. The margin between survival and collapse narrows dangerously. Accidents become frequent. Safety is irrelevant. If a prisoner is crushed, burned, or maimed, work does not stop. The body is removed. The task continues. Life is cheaper than equipment. For prisoners, labor becomes a test of endurance beyond physical limits. Muscles scream. Vision blurs. Thoughts slow. The mind retreats inward, focusing only on the next step, the next breath. Future and past fade. Only the present pain remains. Yet even here, resistance flickers. Tools are sabotaged subtly. Output is slowed just enough to avoid punishment. Prisoners share knowledge, teach one another skills, warn of brutal guards. These acts are small, risky, and dangerous, but they exist. The SS responds by tightening control. Punishments escalate. Surveillance increases. Informers are rewarded. Trust erodes further. The camp becomes not just a place of labor, but a battlefield of willpower. Forced labor reshapes Sachsenhausen's identity. It is no longer merely a site of detention and discipline. It is an engine, a machine fueled by human exhaustion and suffering. Each day it consumes bodies and produces value for the Reich. This transformation marks a turning point. The camp's purpose shifts from breaking enemies to exploiting them fully. Survival becomes conditional on output. Worth is measured in labor hours. As war draws closer, the SS looks at Sachsenhausen and sees a model ready to be scaled. The system works. It produces obedience. It produces profit. It produces death quietly, efficiently, and without interruption. The prisoners feel the change before they understand it. The work grows harsher. The tolerance for weakness disappears. The camp tightens like a vice. What began as forced labor is becoming something more final. And Sachsenhausen, once again, stands at the center of a transformation that will soon engulf millions more. Chapter 7. The Shoe Testing Track. Torture in the Name of Science. The path curves endlessly, a pale ribbon of crushed stone and concrete cutting through the camp like a scar that never heals. At first glance it looks ordinary, almost mundane. A track, neatly laid, carefully maintained. But as the prisoners are forced onto it, day after day, hour after hour, its true purpose reveals itself. This is not a road meant to take anyone anywhere. It is a circle designed to go nowhere at all. At Sachsenhausen, the SS claims efficiency, order, and innovation. Even torture must serve a purpose. The shoe testing track is presented as a scientific necessity, a practical contribution to the Reich. German industry needs durable boots for soldiers marching across Europe. The army needs footwear that can survive endless campaigns. Sachsenhausen will provide the answers. Human beings will provide the test. Prisoners selected for this labor are marched to the track under guard. Many do not know why they have been chosen. There is no explanation, no briefing. They are handed heavy boots of different designs, soles made from various materials, some stiff, some barely holding together. Each pair is numbered, recorded, catalogued. The prisoners are not. They are ordered to march. The track is divided into sections meant to simulate different terrains. Rough gravel that grinds into the soles of the feet. Sharp stones that bruise and split skin. Sand that shifts underfoot, forcing muscles to strain constantly. Smooth concrete that offers no relief, no variation, no mercy. Each surface has been chosen deliberately, each one another way to extract pain. Prisoners march in formation, carrying heavy packs strapped tightly to their backs. Some packs weigh more than the men carrying them. The straps bite into shoulders already raw from labor. Every step sends a jolt through the spine. Every lap tightens the knot of exhaustion inside the chest. Guards stand nearby, watching not for signs of injury, but for signs of slowing. A faltering pace draws immediate attention. Shouts cut through the air. Whips crack. Rifle butts swing. The message is unmistakable. Keep moving, or suffer worse. Hours pass. Then more hours. There are no breaks. No water offered unless guards feel inclined to show mercy, which is rare. Sweat soaks uniforms. Feet blister, then bleed. Socks fuse to skin. With each step, pain spreads upward, from soles to ankles to knees, until even lifting a foot becomes an act of will. The prisoners learn quickly that this is not about endurance alone. It is about obedience beyond reason. The body protests. The mind screams to stop. The track demands that neither be heard. Some prisoners collapse. When they do, guards drag them to the side. Sometimes they are beaten until they stand again. Sometimes they are left where they fall, gasping, faces pressed against the dirt. Sometimes they are removed entirely, their fate unrecorded by those still marching. The SS calls this work. They call it testing. They record how long each boot lasts before failing. They know where patterns. They discuss results with engineers and manufacturers. Reports are written. Conclusions drawn. The suffering that produces this data remains invisible in official documents. For the prisoners, the track becomes a place of dread. Selection for shoe testing is feared more than many punishments. Unlike beatings, which eventually end, the track offers no clear boundary. Men march until their bodies give out. Survival depends not on strength, but on how long pain can be endured without collapse. The sounds linger long after the marching stops. Boots scraping stone, ragged breathing, the occasional cry quickly silenced. At night, prisoners dream of walking, of endless circles, of never reaching a destination. Even sleep offers no escape. The shoe testing track is not hidden. It is not secret. It exists openly within the camp, another reminder that suffering here is systematic, rationalized, and normalized. Guards pass by casually. Officers inspect progress. No one questions the morality of the task. Prisoners come to understand that this track represents something deeper than cruelty. It is the embodiment of the Nazi belief that human beings are expendable resources. If pain produces useful information, then pain is justified. If death results, it is an acceptable cost. The track also serves as a warning. Other prisoners watch the marchers, their faces strained, their movements mechanical. They see what awaits those who fall out of favor, those deemed troublesome, those unlucky enough to be selected. Fear spreads silently through the barracks. Some prisoners attempt to sabotage the process. They alter their gait subtly, hoping to produce inconsistent results. They damage boots when they can, scraping soles against stone, dragging feet unnaturally. These acts are dangerous. Discovery means severe punishment. Still, resistance flickers, however briefly. Guards respond with increased brutality. They shout commands louder. They shorten tempers. They enforce pace with violence. The system tightens. The track consumes more bodies. Over time, the shoe testing unit becomes a dumping ground for prisoners the SS wishes to punish without formal execution. Political prisoners who resist. Men who talk back. Those suspected of organizing. Assignment to the track is a quiet sentence, delivered without paperwork or ceremony. The physical damage is permanent. Even those who survive carry injuries for life. Crushed arches, destroyed joints, chronic infections. Walking becomes painful long after liberation. For many, the track never truly ends. The track's existence also reinforces Sachsenhausen's role as a model camp. Other camps adopt similar practices. Forced marches, endurance testing, labor disguised as necessity. What is proven effective here spreads outward, refined and replicated. The SS takes pride in this efficiency. They see themselves as innovators, solving logistical problems through discipline and sacrifice. The fact that the sacrifice is never their own does not enter the calculation. For the prisoners, the track strips away any remaining illusions. There is no pretense of correction or reform. There is only use. March until you break. If you break, you're replaced. And yet, within this cycle of suffering, moments of quiet humanity persist. A whispered encouragement as prisoners pass one another. A shared glance that says, "Keep going, just one more lap." These moments are fragile, fleeting, but they matter. As the months pass, the track remains, worn smooth by countless footsteps. It bears witness to thousands of hours of pain, to lives shortened not by bullets or gas, but by repetition, by relentless, grinding exhaustion. The shoe-testing track stands as one of Sachsenhausen's most chilling features because it exposes the logic of the camp so clearly. Torture does not need rage. It needs justification. It needs paperwork. It needs a purpose that sounds reasonable when spoken aloud. Here, suffering is framed as progress. Death as data. And the prisoners, marching in endless circles, become living proof of how easily cruelty can hide behind the language of necessity. As Sachsenhausen continues to evolve, the lessons learned on this track will not stay confined within its curves. They will inform new methods, harsher systems, and broader applications of terror, as the camp moves ever closer to its next, even darker transformation. Chapter 8: Discipline, Punishment, and Public Terror. The silence breaks without warning. A name is shouted across the roll call square, sharp and final. Heads remain forward. Eyes stay fixed on the ground. Everyone understands what comes next. A single word has just pulled someone out of the fragile illusion of routine and into something far worse. In Sachsenhausen, punishment is never private, and it is never meant for only one person. The prisoner steps forward slowly, legs stiff, heart hammering. Guards seize him, dragging him toward the center of the square. The gravel bites into knees as he is forced down. The air feels heavier now, thick with anticipation and fear. Thousands of men stand motionless, compelled to watch, compelled to learn. Discipline at Sachsenhausen is not spontaneous violence. It is structured, codified, carefully staged. Every punishment serves a dual purpose: to break the individual and to warn everyone else. Terror here is instructional. The SS believes order must be absolute. Any deviation, no matter how small, is treated as defiance. A missing button, a dirty uniform, a moment of hesitation during work, speaking without permission, looking up, looking away. The rules are endless, and they shift constantly. This ensures that no one can ever be fully compliant. Guilt is unavoidable. One of the most feared punishments is flogging. The prisoner is tied to a wooden post, back exposed, arms stretched high so that muscles strain painfully even before the first blow lands. An SS guard reads the sentence aloud. 25 lashes. 50. Sometimes more. The whip cracks through the air with terrifying clarity, each strike echoing across the square. The first blow's steel breath. The skin splits quickly. Blood runs down the back, soaking into trousers, dripping onto the ground. Screams rise involuntarily, then break into hoarse gasps. Guards count carefully. Accuracy matters. This is not rage. It is procedure. Prisoners are forced to stand and watch the entire punishment. Turning away is itself punishable. The SS wants the sound of the whip, the sight of blood, the smell of iron in the air to imprint itself into memory. Fear spreads more efficiently than any command. Another punishment is the standing cell. Prisoners are locked into narrow vertical spaces barely wider than their bodies. They cannot sit. They cannot stretch. Hours pass, sometimes days. Legs swell. Circulation slows. Pain becomes constant. When the door finally opens, some prisoners collapse immediately, unable to feel their feet. Solitary confinement is used to erase identity. Prisoners are placed in dark cells, cut off from sound, light, and human contact. Time dissolves. Hunger intensifies. Thoughts spiral inward. Some emerge broken, unable to speak. Others do not emerge at all. Then there are the hanging poles. Prisoners' arms are bound behind their backs and hoisted upward, wrenching shoulders from their sockets. The pain is immediate and excruciating. Bodies twitch. Nerves scream. This punishment leaves lasting damage, even when it does not kill. Public executions take place with calculated efficiency. Shooting ranges are hidden just beyond view, but word spreads quickly. Prisoners know where screams come from. They know what the sudden absence of a familiar face means. The camp communicates death without needing to announce it. Hangings are sometimes conducted openly, especially when the SS wants to make a point. The condemned is brought forward. The noose is placed carefully. Guards ensure visibility. Silence is enforced. The body drops. Feet kick briefly. Then stillness. The prisoner population absorbs the message. Punishment extends beyond physical harm. Food rations are reduced. Work assignments worsened. Entire barracks are punished for the actions of one person. Collective responsibility ensures that prisoners police one another, turning fear into a social weapon. The SS also uses humiliation as discipline. Prisoners are forced to crawl through mud, to sing while being beaten, to perform meaningless tasks repeatedly until collapse. Laughter from guards accompanies these rituals, reinforcing power through mockery. Every punishment is documented. Records are kept. Infractions are logged. Discipline becomes part of the camp's administrative routine. Violence is bureaucratized, stripped of emotion, justified through paperwork. For the guards, this system reinforces authority. They learn that cruelty, when standardized, carries little personal responsibility. Orders are followed. Procedures executed. Accountability dissolves into hierarchy. For prisoners, the psychological impact is devastating. Fear becomes constant, ambient, impossible to escape. The anticipation of punishment often hurts more than the punishment itself. Every movement is weighed. Every breath monitored. Night does not bring relief. Guards patrol with flashlights and dogs. Random inspections tear prisoners from sleep. A shouted order can send men scrambling into formation in the freezing dark. Punishment does not follow a schedule. That unpredictability is intentional. The camp's discipline system also serves as training. Guards fresh to Sachsenhausen learn how to administer punishment without hesitation. They observe senior officers. They practice detachment. Over time, cruelty becomes routine. Some guards embrace this role eagerly. Others grow numb. Either way, the system functions. Personal feelings are irrelevant. Terror is maintained. Prisoners develop strategies to survive. They memorize rules that constantly change. They watch guards' moods. They avoid attention. They help one another quietly when possible. Survival becomes a skill honed through observation and restraint. Despite this, punishment remains unavoidable. No one passes through Sachsenhausen without experiencing it. Even those who comply perfectly are eventually targeted. The camp needs victims to sustain fear. The violence also reinforces hierarchy among prisoners. Those given minor authority by the SS often enforce discipline themselves, sometimes with greater cruelty. Power corrupts quickly when survival is at stake. As years pass, the severity of punishments escalates. What once earned a beating now earns confinement. What once earned confinement now earns death. The boundaries shift gradually, almost imperceptibly. The SS interprets this escalation as progress. Discipline appears tighter. Resistance appears lower. The camp seems to function smoothly. The cost is measured only in bodies, and bodies are abundant. Sachsenhausen's punishment system becomes a model for other camps. Its methods are copied, refined, expanded. Public terror proves effective. Fear proves efficient. For prisoners, the knowledge spreads quietly. This camp is not meant to correct behavior. It is meant to erase it. Discipline here is not about rules. It is about domination. And as Sachsenhausen continues to perfect the spectacle of punishment, it prepares its prisoners for something even more final, something that no amount of obedience can prevent, as the camp moves closer to systematic killing on a scale that will soon redefine terror itself. Chapter 9. Sachsenhausen and the Nazi Leadership. The motor cars arrive without sirens, their engines low, controlled, deliberate. Gates open smoothly. Guards snap to attention. Prisoners on work details are ordered to face the ground, eyes lowered, bodies rigid. The camp holds its breath. When high-ranking officials visit Sachsenhausen, nothing is left to chance. This is not a place of shame to be hidden. This is a place meant to be seen. Sachsenhausen's proximity to Berlin gives a unique status within the Nazi system. Less than an hour from the seat of power, it becomes a destination for inspection, instruction, and demonstration. Here, the leadership of the SS can observe their creation firsthand. Here, they can measure how effectively terror functions when it is properly organized. Heinrich Himmler views Sachsenhausen not merely as a camp, but as a statement. It is proof that the SS, not the army, not the party bureaucracy, is the true guardian of the Reich's ideological future. Every visit reinforces that message. Every report sent back to Berlin carries the implication that control, once perfected, can be expanded indefinitely. The camp commandant understands this role well. Sachsenhausen is always on display. Barracks are kept in rigid order. Roll calls are conducted with exaggerated precision. Punishments are executed cleanly, efficiently, without visible disorder. When leaders tour the camp, they are shown discipline, not suffering. What lies beneath is carefully concealed. Prisoners sense the difference on these days. Guards are sharper, more controlled, their cruelty colder rather than explosive. Violence still occurs, but it is measured, deliberate, almost ceremonial. This is terror with witnesses, and it must appear effective, not excessive. Among the visitors are senior SS officers, administrators, and future camp commandants. They walk the grounds, take notes, ask questions. How long can prisoners work on reduced rations? How quickly does discipline break resistance? Which punishments produce compliance without provoking rebellion? Sachsenhausen becomes a classroom. Future leaders of camps across the Reich pass through here, absorbing its methods. They learn how to structure authority, how to use prisoner hierarchies, how to balance exploitation with exhaustion. They watch how fear is sustained not through constant chaos, but through predictable unpredictability. Sachsenhausen also holds prisoners of particular interest to the regime. Prominent political figures, resistance leaders, foreign dignitaries, and individuals whose names carry weight beyond the camp fences are sometimes confined here. Their presence is deliberate. The SS wants them close, monitored, controlled. These high-profile prisoners are treated differently, though not necessarily better. They may be isolated, interrogated repeatedly, used as leverage in negotiations or propaganda. Their survival often depends not on mercy, but on usefulness. Sachsenhausen allows the SS to keep such prisoners within reach of Berlin, accessible when needed. The camp also serves as a proving ground for policy. New regulations are often tested here before being rolled out elsewhere. Changes in prisoner classification, adjustments to labor organization, new punishment protocols. Sachsenhausen's role as prototype extends beyond architecture into governance itself. Reports flow constantly from the camp to SS headquarters. Numbers, outputs, disciplinary actions, deaths. These documents strip human experience down to data points. A beating becomes a statistic. A death becomes a line entry. Distance dulls responsibility. For the leadership, Sachsenhausen offers reassurance. It demonstrates that mass detention can be managed without collapse, that large populations can be controlled with limited personnel, that terror, when systematized, does not spiral out of control. This confidence will prove catastrophic. The camp's role in training extends to ideology. Guards are indoctrinated not only in procedure, but in belief. Prisoners are enemies. Weakness is contagion. Mercy is betrayal. Sachsenhausen reinforces these ideas daily, embedding them into routine. The SS leadership uses the camp to cultivate loyalty. Promotions are earned here. Reputation is built here. Officers who demonstrate efficiency and ruthlessness advance. Those who hesitate do not. Career paths are forged in gravel and blood. Prisoners observe these visits from the margins. They notice the sudden cleaning, the rehearsed order, the way guards stand straighter, speak more formally. They understand that their suffering is being evaluated, not questioned. Sometimes, selected prisoners are paraded during inspections, forced to perform tasks, or stand silently as examples. Their bodies tell a story the visitors rarely acknowledge. Hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, trembling hands. These details are ignored in favor of charts and summaries. Sachsenhausen's role also extends into the legal framework of terror. The camp becomes a reference point in internal discussions about protective custody, a term that disguises indefinite imprisonment without trial. Legal justifications are refined here, making repression appear orderly, lawful, necessary. As Germany moves closer to war, the importance of Sachsenhausen increases. The SS anticipates expansion. Occupied territories will produce new prisoners. Resistance will grow. Camps must be ready. Sachsenhausen shows them how. The leadership's involvement shapes the camp's evolution. Expectations rise. Output increases. Tolerance for inefficiency disappears. The pressure felt by prisoners intensifies as the camp strives to meet ideological and administrative benchmarks set from above. For the SS, Sachsenhausen is a success story. It confirms their worldview. It validates their methods. It convinces them that human beings can be reduced to units, managed, exploited, discarded. This confidence is dangerous. It removes restraint. It encourages escalation. What works here, they believe, will work anywhere. Prisoners feel this shift as a tightening grip. Punishments become harsher. Labor demands increase. Surveillance intensifies. The camp becomes more rigid, more unforgiving, less willing to tolerate even minimal deviation. The leadership does not see suffering. They see compliance. They see order. They see results. The moral cost is invisible behind layers of bureaucracy and belief. As Sachsenhausen continues to host the architects of terror, it becomes more than a camp. It becomes a command post, a laboratory, a symbol. Decisions made here ripple outward, shaping policies that will soon engulf Europe. The prisoners do not know the details of these meetings, the memoranda exchanged, the conclusions drawn. They only know that the camp feels heavier, more absolute, as if something vast is being prepared beyond the fences. Sachsenhausen has proven itself. The model works. The leadership is satisfied. What they plan next will require everything this camp has taught them, and far more than its prisoners can possibly endure. Chapter 10: Jewish Prisoners and the Escalation of Racial Persecution. The train doors slide open with a metallic scrape, and the smell of smoke drifts in before the men do. Their clothes are rumpled, faces bruised, eyes still burning from nights without sleep. Some carry nothing. Others clutch small bundles that guards tear away moments later. The platform is loud with commands, but beneath the noise there is another sound, quieter and heavier, the sound of a line being crossed. 4 Jewish prisoners arriving at Sachsenhausen. The rules that once governed punishment have begun to dissolve. Something more absolute has taken their place. In the early years, Jewish men appear in the camp sporadically, folded into other categories. Some are arrested as political opponents, others as alleged economic criminals, accused of violations meant to justify detention rather than explain it. Their treatment is brutal, but not yet singular. They are beaten, humiliated, worked to exhaustion like others. Yet even then, they sense a difference, a sharpened edge in the guards' voices, a contempt that does not need provocation. That difference becomes unmistakable in November of 1938. Across Germany and Austria, synagogues burn, Jewish businesses are smashed, homes are invaded. The violence spills into the streets and does not stop. In the aftermath, tens of thousands of Jewish men are arrested in coordinated raids and sent to concentration camps. Sachsenhausen receives thousands within days. They arrive carrying the smell of fire and broken glass. Some still wear nightclothes beneath coats thrown on in panic. Many bear fresh wounds from beatings administered in public, before neighbors, before families. The shock has not yet settled. The belief that this is temporary, that release will come, flickers briefly, then fades. Inside the camp, the violence intensifies immediately. Jewish prisoners are singled out during roll call, forced to stand longer, forced to kneel, forced to endure beatings for imagined infractions. Guards shout insults laced with ideology, turning hatred into performance. The roll call square becomes a stage for racial degradation. Unlike other prisoners, Jewish men are often offered conditional release. The terms are clear and merciless. Sign documents relinquishing property. Prove arrangements for immigration. Accept humiliation publicly. Those who comply may leave. Those who cannot, or will not, remain. Sachsenhausen becomes a pressure chamber, squeezing Jews out of German society through terror. For many, release is not salvation. They return home to lives already destroyed, resources confiscated, futures uncertain. For those left behind, the message is unmistakable. This camp is no longer merely a tool of repression. It is an instrument of racial policy. Jewish prisoners are marked with yellow triangles, often combined with others to indicate additional alleged offenses. The symbol isolates them instantly. Guards identify them at a glance. Fellow prisoners, conditioned by fear and prejudice, often keep their distance. Isolation deepens. Survival becomes even more precarious. Work assignments grow harsher. Jewish prisoners are frequently sent to the most punishing labor details. Brickworks, construction, the shoe testing track. Their bodies are pushed beyond limits already strained by hunger and fear. Injuries accumulate. Medical care is withheld. Weakness is punished. Violence against Jewish prisoners is not always logged. Beatings happen casually, without explanation, without record. A guard's whim becomes law. This randomness is itself a weapon, teaching that there is no appeal, no rule that offers protection. As the months pass, the camp's atmosphere shifts. Anti-Jewish ideology hardens into policy. Guards are encouraged to demonstrate severity. Punishments escalate. Death becomes more frequent, less remarked upon. The boundary between discipline and annihilation begins to blur. With the outbreak of war, the situation deteriorates further. The Reich's enemies multiply, and Nazi ideology radicalizes under the pressure of conflict. Jews are no longer framed merely as internal threats. They are cast as enemies of the state, of the war effort, of the future itself. In Sachsenhausen, this shift is felt in small, deadly ways. Food rations shrink further for Jewish prisoners. Work hours lengthen. Beatings become routine rather than corrective. The camp's bureaucracy, once meticulous, grows indifferent to their survival. The SS also experiments with separation. Jewish prisoners are housed together at times, isolated from others, concentrated where surveillance is easier and violence more intense. Rumors spread through the camp. Deportations, transfers east, unknown destinations. Fear takes on new shapes. Jewish prisoners begin to disappear in larger numbers. Some are transferred to other camps. Others are killed inside Sachsenhausen itself. Executions become more frequent. Bodies are removed quietly. Roll call numbers still balance. The system continues. For non-Jewish prisoners, the escalation is visible. They see Jewish men targeted relentlessly. They see how quickly categories can harden into destinies. The lesson is clear. The camp is changing. Its purpose is evolving. Inside the barracks, whispered conversations carry fragments of information. News smuggled in. Stories of ghettos, of mass shootings, of camps farther east where no one returns. The details are incomplete, but the direction is unmistakable. The SS leadership treats this as progress. Sachsenhausen adapts smoothly to new priorities. Its structures of control prove flexible enough to accommodate radicalized policy. Terror intensifies without disrupting order. Efficiency remains intact. Jewish prisoners feel the weight of inevitability settle in. Resistance becomes quieter, more internal. Survival strategies narrow. Some focus on endurance, others on preserving dignity in small ways. A shared prayer whispered at night, a memory repeated silently to keep identity alive. Acts of solidarity still occur, despite the danger. A piece of bread passed discreetly, a warning about a brutal guard. These gestures are rare and risky. They are also essential, small affirmations that humanity has not been completely erased. As war continues, Sachsenhausen receives Jewish prisoners from beyond Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia, later occupied territories. Languages multiply. Confusion deepens. The camp becomes a crossroads of persecution. The SS no longer pretends that labor alone is the goal. Jewish prisoners are increasingly treated as expendable. Their deaths are accepted, expected, unremarkable. The camp's earlier logic of exploitation gives way to something colder. This transformation is not sudden. It unfolds step by step, policy by policy, beating by beating. Sachsenhausen does not become an extermination camp, but it becomes something that prepares the way, normalizing the idea that entire groups can be destroyed systematically. Prisoners sense that the camp is aligning itself with a broader machinery of death. Transfers increase. Executions escalate. Rumors solidify into dread certainty. Whatever is coming next will be worse than what they have endured so far. The camp that once claimed to discipline enemies of the state now participates openly in racial annihilation. Its role as a prototype proves deadly once again. The methods refined here will be applied elsewhere with even greater brutality. For Jewish prisoners, Sachsenhausen is no longer a place where survival depends on obedience or usefulness. It is a place where survival itself is increasingly unlikely. As the chapter closes, the camp stands on the threshold of a new phase, one defined not just by terror and control, but by mass death integrated into policy and practice. Sachsenhausen is ready for it, and so are the men who run it. Chapter 11. War comes to Sachsenhausen. The sirens do not sound inside the camp. There is no announcement, no formal declaration. Yet the shift is felt immediately. Guards move with sharper urgency. Orders arrive more frequently. Trains begin to come and go at odd hours. Somewhere beyond the fences, Europe has gone to war, and Sachsenhausen is no longer a place preparing for expansion. It is now part of the war itself. When Germany invades Poland, the camp's purpose changes almost overnight. The enemy is no longer abstract. He is captured, transported, delivered. New prisoners arrive wearing unfamiliar uniforms, speaking unfamiliar languages, carrying the shock of defeat on their faces. They are herded through the gate with the same efficiency as those before them, but the scale is different now. Larger, faster, relentless. The camp swells beyond its original design. Barracks overflow. Men sleep packed together, so tightly they cannot turn without disturbing one another. The air grows thick with breath and sickness. Lice spread rapidly. Coughs echo day and night. Disease begins to claim bodies faster than the guards can remove them. Among the new arrivals are prisoners from occupied territories. Poles, then later men from across Europe. Resistance fighters. Civilians swept up in reprisals. Intellectuals. Clergy. Anyone deemed a threat to German control. The categories multiply. The cruelty deepens. Then come the Soviet prisoners of war. They arrive in columns that look less like military units and more like funeral processions. Starved, wounded, exhausted from forced marches, many collapse before reaching the camp gates. Guards do not slow for them. Those who fall are beaten. Some are shot where they lie. The SS views Soviet POWs not as soldiers protected by convention, but as ideological enemies. Subhuman, disposable. Their treatment reflects this belief immediately. They are separated from other prisoners, isolated, denied even the minimal rations others receive. Hunger becomes lethal within days. Executions follow quickly. Prisoners are led away in small groups, told they are being transferred. Instead, they are taken to killing sites prepared in advance. Shots ring out, muffled but unmistakable. The camp absorbs the sound without reaction. Death has become routine. Inside Sachsenhausen, the pace of killing accelerates. The SS experiments with methods that allow executions to happen faster, quieter, with less psychological strain on the perpetrators. Shooting ranges are adapted. Procedures refined. Records simplified. Efficiency replaces hesitation. The war also transforms forced labor. The Reich demands weapons, uniforms, infrastructure. Sachsenhausen responds by expanding its work details. Prisoners are pushed harder, fed less, worked longer. The margin between survival and death narrows further. Factories tied to the camp operate day and night. Prisoners stumble back to barracks, barely able to stand, only to be dragged out again before dawn. Injuries go untreated. Weakness is punished. Collapse is fatal. Bombers rumble faintly in the distance on some nights, a reminder that the war is no longer far away. Prisoners listen from their bunks, unsure whether to hope or fear. Air raids mean chaos. Chaos means danger. Guards grow more unpredictable under stress. The SS tightens control. Punishments become harsher. Surveillance increases. Informers are encouraged. Any sign of resistance is crushed immediately. The camp must remain stable, no matter what happens beyond the fences. Sachsenhausen's role expands beyond imprisonment and labor. It becomes a site of mass execution, especially for Soviet POWs. Thousands are murdered in cold efficiency. Their deaths are rarely recorded with names. Numbers suffice. The psychological impact on prisoners is profound. They see men arrive and vanish within hours. They hear rumors of mass graves. They smell gunpowder mixed with pine and damp earth. Fear takes on a new dimension. This is no longer just a place where people are broken slowly. It is a place where people are erased quickly. Guards adapt as well. Some grow brutal under pressure. Others retreat into procedure, clinging to rules as shields against conscience. New recruits arrive, younger, more radicalized, trained to see mercy as weakness. Sachsenhausen becomes a crucible, forging the next generation of camp personnel. The camp commandant receives new directives regularly. The war demands results. More labor, fewer mouths to feed, higher output. Prisoners feel these demands as heavier blows, longer hours, shrinking rations. Starvation becomes visible. Cheeks hollow further. Eyes sink deeper. Men lose weight rapidly, their bodies consuming themselves to stay alive. Deaths from exhaustion and disease spike. Roll call numbers fluctuate daily. And still, the trains keep coming. With each new transport, the camp's original purpose recedes further into the past. Sachsenhausen is no longer primarily a tool of political repression. It is a node in a vast wartime system of exploitation and killing. News filters in through whispers. Defeats. Victories. Cities falling. Fronts shifting. Prisoners cling to scraps of information, trying to imagine an end. The guard's behavior becomes a barometer. Confidence one day, anxiety the next. The SS leadership continues to visit, but now with different questions. How many can be worked? How many can be eliminated quietly? How quickly can space be cleared for new arrivals? The language of extermination creeps into administrative speech. Executions of Soviet POWs reach staggering numbers. Prisoners working near execution sites hear shots throughout the day. The rhythm becomes familiar. Load. Fire. Silence. Repeat. The forest absorbs the sound. The ground absorbs the bodies. For many prisoners, this period marks the loss of any remaining illusion. Survival feels arbitrary. Obedience no longer guarantees time. Utility no longer ensures protection. Death comes swiftly and without explanation. Yet even here, acts of resistance persist. Prisoners share information, sabotage machinery, slow production where possible. These acts are small and dangerous, but they exist. They remind the SS that control is never absolute. The war also brings foreign forced laborers and prisoners from across Europe into Sachsenhausen's orbit. Languages collide. Confusion deepens. Solidarity becomes harder, but necessity forces cooperation in unexpected ways. As casualties mount on the front, the Reich grows more desperate. Sachsenhausen is pushed to its limits. Infrastructure strains. Supplies falter. Violence escalates as fear seeps into the ranks of the guards themselves. The camp begins to feel like a pressure vessel, holding too much suffering, too many bodies, too much death. Something has to give. Prisoners sense it. Guards sense it. The system creaks under its own weight. Sachsenhausen has proven it can function in wartime. It has adapted. It has delivered labor and death on demand. For the SS, this is confirmation of success. For the prisoners, it is confirmation that the worst may still be ahead. As the war grinds on, the camp stands fully integrated into the machinery of conflict, no longer on the periphery of history, but at its brutal center, preparing for an escalation that will push terror beyond anything they have yet endured. Chapter 12: Medical Abuse, Experiments, and Killing Facilities. The door closes softly, almost politely, and the sound is more unsettling than a slam. Inside the room, the air smells of disinfectant and damp stone. A man is told to sit, then to stand, then to step forward. He believes, for a moment, that this might be medical care. That illusion lasts only seconds. In Sachsenhausen, medicine has been stripped of its purpose. Healing has been replaced by procedure, and procedure by death. As the war intensifies, the camp's machinery grows more specialized. Violence is no longer only a response to defiance or exhaustion. It becomes methodical, concealed behind clinical language and controlled environments. Sachsenhausen evolves again, this time into a place where killing is engineered to be efficient, discreet, and repeatable. Doctors operate within the camp, but they are not healers. They are SS physicians, trained in ideology before medicine, loyal to the regime before ethics. Their role is not to preserve life, but to serve policy. Under their supervision, suffering is reframed as research, and murder becomes an administrative task. Medical abuse begins quietly. Prisoners are examined not to diagnose illness, but to determine suitability. Who can work? Who is too weak? Who could be experimented on? Who can be eliminated without consequence? Selection happens with a glance, a note on a chart, a nod exchange between officers. Some prisoners are subjected to forced medical procedures without consent or explanation. Blood is drawn repeatedly. Injections are administered. Bodies are monitored as reactions unfold. Pain is recorded. Deaths are noted briefly, if at all. The results matter. The lives do not. Experiments are conducted under the pretense of military necessity. The Reich needs answers. Vaccines, treatments, endurance data. Prisoners become test subjects because they are available, because their deaths carry no weight in the SS worldview. Failure is expected. Survival is incidental. Infections are deliberately introduced. Prisoners are exposed to diseases, then observed as symptoms progress. Fever spikes. Delirium sets in. Bodies weaken rapidly. Medical staff intervene not to ease suffering, but to prolong it just long enough to collect information. When the data is sufficient, treatment ends. Sterilization experiments are carried out in various forms, reflecting the regime's obsession with racial control. Procedures are painful, invasive, and often fatal. Survivors carry lifelong damage, physical and psychological, even after liberation. Their bodies become evidence of ideology enacted with scalpels and syringes. But the most chilling development at Sachsenhausen is the construction of dedicated killing facilities. As executions increase, the SS seeks methods that reduce visibility, speed the process, and distance perpetrators from their victims. This search leads to the creation of what becomes known as Station Z. Station Z sits at the edge of the camp, away from the barracks, concealed behind walls and trees. From the outside, it appears functional, unremarkable. Inside, it is designed solely for death. Here, the SS refines execution into an industrial process. One of the primary methods used is the neck shooting device. Prisoners are brought in one at a time, often under the guise of a medical examination. They are told to stand against a measuring device to check their height. As they comply, a shot is fired from behind, killing them instantly. The body collapses forward. The next prisoner is summoned. This method minimizes resistance. There is no spectacle, no warning. Death arrives as an interruption, not a confrontation. For the SS, it is efficient. For the prisoners, it is terrifying precisely because of its deception. A gas chamber is also constructed at Station Z, smaller than those used later in extermination camps, but deadly nonetheless. Prisoners are led inside, doors sealed, gas released. The process is monitored through small windows. When it ends, bodies are removed, recorded as disposed. The camp crematorium operates nearby. Smoke rises into the air, sometimes visible from the barracks, sometimes carried by the wind. Prisoners learn to recognize the smell. Burned flesh, ash, the remnants of people they knew, reduced to particles that settle on the campgrounds. Executions are no longer rare events. They're scheduled, organized, integrated into daily operations. Lists are prepared, numbers assigned. Guards escort prisoners calmly, as if moving supplies rather than people. Medical staff participate actively. They certify deaths. They oversee procedures. They ensure efficiency. Their presence lends a veneer of legitimacy to mass murder, transforming killing into a bureaucratic process. For prisoners, the fear deepens. Illness becomes dangerous not only because of suffering, but because it attracts attention. Reporting to the infirmary may mean selection. Avoiding it may mean death from untreated disease. Every choice carries risk. Rumors spread through whispers at night. Of a place where people go and do not return. Of a room where shots are heard but bodies are never seen again. Of smoke that smells different, heavier, final. Knowledge is fragmented, but dread is complete. The SS leadership views these developments as progress. Sachsenhausen demonstrates that killing can be conducted quietly, efficiently, without disrupting camp operations. The model evolves again, offering solutions that will soon be applied elsewhere on a larger scale. Medical abuse also serves another purpose. It hardens the perpetrators. Guards and doctors grow accustomed to death delivered at close range. Hesitation fades. Routine replaces shock. The moral barrier erodes day by day. Some doctors pursue these experiments eagerly, seeing opportunity for advancement, recognition, publication. Others comply silently, trapped by ideology, ambition, or fear. Either way, the system functions. Prisoners sense the camp's transformation. The randomness of death increases. People vanish without explanation. Work details return missing men whose names are never spoken again. Roll call numbers still balance. The absence becomes normalized. Even within this horror, moments of resistance persist. Prisoners warn one another when possible. They hide illnesses. They share knowledge. These acts are small and dangerous, but they represent refusal to surrender entirely. The camp's killing facilities mark a turning point. Sachsenhausen is no longer only a place where people die as a result of labor, punishment, or neglect. It is now a place where people are deliberately killed as policy. This shift is subtle but decisive. Death is no longer a byproduct. It is an objective. As the war grinds on, the SS looks at Sachsenhausen and sees a system that works. Medical abuse, efficient execution, controlled disposal. The lessons learned here will not remain contained. For the prisoners, the realization settles in slowly, then all at once. There is no depth to which the camp will not sink, no line it will not cross. Sachsenhausen has crossed it already, and as the smoke drifts upward and the machinery of death hums quietly at the camp's edge, the prisoners sense that survival now depends not only on endurance, but on forces entirely beyond their control, as the camp moves closer to its final, catastrophic phase. Chapter 13: Resistance, Survival, and Silent Defiance. The camp is loud with commands, boots, whistles, and shouted numbers. Yet beneath that noise runs another current, quieter and far more dangerous. It is the sound of people refusing, in small and nearly invisible ways, to disappear. In Sachsenhausen, resistance does not announce itself with gunfire or banners. It moves in whispers, glances, pauses held a second too long. It survives because it must. For most prisoners, open rebellion is unthinkable. The camp's design, its punishments, its constant surveillance make collective uprising nearly impossible. Any attempt would be crushed within minutes. The SS knows this. The prisoners know it too. And so resistance takes another form. It becomes subtle, fragmented, personal, silent. From the earliest days, political prisoners bring with them habits formed underground. They know how to communicate without being heard, how to pass information in fragments, how to recognize, trust cautiously. Inside Sachsenhausen, these skills become lifelines. A folded scrap of paper hidden in a shoe, a coded phrase exchanged during work, a warning whispered during roll call when guards turn away for a moment. Survival itself becomes an act of defiance. The camp is designed to break bodies and erase identity, to reduce men to numbers and functions. To endure under those conditions, to remain mentally present, to remember one's name, one's past, one's beliefs, becomes a quiet rebellion against the system's intent. Prisoners resist by helping one another when they can. A stronger man takes the heaviest part of a load. Someone with access to a kitchen sneaks a potato peel into a pocket. A tailor alters a uniform to fit better, reducing chafing that could lead to infection. These gestures are small, but they matter. They save lives measured in days, sometimes weeks, sometimes longer. Information is currency. News from outside filters in through new arrivals, civilian workers, sympathetic guards, or stolen radios hidden at enormous risk. Prisoners trade fragments of knowledge about the war's progress. A defeat here, an advance there. Hope rises and falls with each rumor, but knowing that the world still exists beyond the fences keeps despair from becoming total. In some barracks, prisoners organize informal networks based on political affiliation, nationality, or shared experience. These groups offer protection where possible. They share food, distribute clothing, and try to shield the weakest members from the most brutal labor assignments. The SS works constantly to disrupt these networks, using informers, transfers, and targeted punishment. Despite this, organization persists. Prisoners memorize names of the dead, committing them to memory, so they will not vanish entirely. They share stories in whispers at night, recalling lives before the camp. A profession, a family, a city street. Memory becomes a form of resistance, a way to assert that the camp has not consumed everything. Sabotage occurs whenever opportunity arises. Tools are dulled deliberately. Machines are damaged just enough to slow production without drawing immediate suspicion. Errors are introduced quietly into paperwork. These acts are dangerous. Discovery means torture or death. Yet they continue, because slowing the machinery of exploitation feels like reclaiming a fraction of agency. Cultural resistance emerges in unexpected ways. Prisoners recite poetry from memory, sing softly when guard are distant, share prayers in languages the SS does not understand. These moments preserve identity and meaning in a place designed to erase both. Jewish prisoners, targeted relentlessly, often face the harshest conditions. Yet even here, defiance survives. Religious observance is maintained in secret. Fasts are remembered, even when hunger is already overwhelming. Words of faith are whispered, not as surrender, but as assertion of dignity. Resistance is not always noble or unified. The camp's brutality fractures trust. Some prisoners collaborate to survive. Others exploit positions of authority granted by the SS. These choices create resentment and guilt that linger long after liberation. Survival in Sachsenhausen is morally complex, shaped by fear and scarcity. The SS understands that total domination requires psychological surrender, and so it works tirelessly to crush these forms of resistance. Informers are rewarded. Collective punishment is imposed. Entire barracks are beaten or deprived of food because of one suspected act. The message is clear. Solidarity is dangerous. Yet the system never fully succeeds. For every network dismantled, another forms quietly. For every voice silenced, another remembers. Resistance adapts, just as terror does. Some prisoners take greater risks. They document crimes, memorizing details of executions, experiments, and deaths. They commit names, dates, and methods to memory, intending to bear witness if they survive. This is perhaps the most dangerous form of resistance of all, because it threatens the camp's future denial. There are also moments of open defiance, rare and usually fatal. A refusal to strike another prisoner, a shouted insult hurled at a guard, an attempt to escape, almost always ending in death. These acts ripple through the camp, inspiring fear and admiration in equal measure. Escape attempts are few, but they matter. Even failed attempts force the SS to respond, to tighten security, to expose its own vulnerability. The cost is paid in blood, often by others. Yet the idea that escape is even possible sustains hope. Survival strategies evolve constantly. Prisoners learn which guards are most brutal, which can be bribed or avoided. They learn when to speak and when to remain invisible. They learn that strength is not always physical. Adaptability becomes the most valuable trait. As the war progresses and conditions worsen, resistance grows more desperate. Food is scarcer, death more frequent. The camp feels increasingly unstable. Prisoners sense that the system is straining, even as it grows more violent. In this environment, solidarity across categories begins to emerge more often. Political prisoners help Jews when they can. National divisions soften under shared suffering. The camp's attempt to fragment its population never fully erases the recognition of shared humanity. The SS notices the tension. Crackdowns intensify. Transfers are used to break networks. Executions are staged publicly to reinforce fear. Yet the underlying current persists, stubborn and unyielding. At night, lying in bunks stacked tightly together, prisoners whisper plans that may never be realized. They imagine liberation. They debate what they will say if they survive. They promise one another to remember. These promises matter. They keep people alive when food and strength cannot. They create a future in the imagination when none exists in reality. Resistance in Sachsenhausen does not overturn the camp. It does not stop the killings. It does not dismantle the machinery of terror. But it does something else. It preserves fragments of humanity in a place designed to obliterate them. Every shared crust of bread, every whispered warning, every remembered name. These are acts the SS cannot fully control or erase. As the camp moves closer to its final phase, prisoners sense that time is running out. Transfers increase. Executions accelerate. Rumors of evacuation circulate. The fragile networks of resistance brace for what comes next. They do not know how or when the camp will end. They only know that when it does, someone must survive to tell the truth. And so resistance continues, quietly, stubbornly, against all odds, as Sachsenhausen prepares to enter its final, most deadly chapter. Chapter 14. Death marches and the camps collapse. The order comes suddenly, but not unexpectedly. Prisoners sense it before it is announced. Guards are restless. Files are burned. Offices emptied. The camp feels different, as if it is holding its breath. Beyond the fences, the distant thunder of artillery no longer feels like rumor. It feels close. Too close. Sachsenhausen, once the model of control, is beginning to unravel. By early 1945, the war has turned decisively against Germany. The Red Army is advancing rapidly from the east, tearing through territory once considered secure. For the SS leadership, the camp is no longer an asset to be preserved. It is a liability. Prisoners cannot be allowed to fall into enemy hands. Witnesses must be removed. Evidence must disappear. Evacuation orders arrive with brutal clarity. Tens of thousands of prisoners are to be marched westward, away from the approaching front. There is no plan for shelter, no provision for food, no medical support. The objective is not survival. It is removal. Prisoners are assembled quickly, given moments to prepare. Some are so weak they cannot stand without help. Others clutch scraps of clothing, hoping against reason that warmth might matter. The sick are pulled from bunks, beaten awake, forced in a line. Those who cannot walk are shot on the spot. The camp does not have time for them anymore. Columns form at the gate, stretching farther than the eye can see. Guards bark orders, rifles ready. Dogs strain forward. Snow crunches underfoot. The air is bitter, cutting through thin uniforms. Hunger already grips every step. This is not a march. It is a purge in motion. The first miles are chaos. Prisoners stumble, collide, fall. Guards fire without warning. Bodies collapse into ditches, onto roadsides, into forests that will soon swallow them. No one stops. Stopping means death. As the columns move through towns and villages, civilians watch in stunned silence. Some avert their eyes. Others stare openly at the spectacle of skeletal men marching under gunpoint. A few risk everything to throw bread or potatoes toward the road. Guards respond with violence. Aid is forbidden. The march stretches over days, then weeks. Prisoners sleep where they collapse, in fields, barns, roadside ditches. There are no blankets, no fires. Frostbite sets in. Feet swell and split. Shoes disintegrate. Each morning, bodies are left behind, stiff and unmoving, stripped of anything useful. Guards grow more brutal as exhaustion spreads. Their own fear sharpens cruelty. They know the war is lost. They know what capture may mean. They take it out on the prisoners, beating them for slowing, for breathing too loudly, for existing. Food is almost non-existent. A handful of bread for days of marching. Hunger becomes delirium. Some prisoners chew grass, bark, scraps of leather. Others simply stop feeling hunger at all, their bodies shutting down. Those who fall too often are dragged to the side and shot. Sometimes guards do not bother. They let prisoners die where they fall. The march leaves a trail of corpses marking the road like milestones of collapse. Sachsenhausen itself empties rapidly. Barracks that once overflowed stand hollow. The roll call square is silent. Smoke no longer rises from chimneys. The camp, so carefully designed, is abandoned in fragments, stripped of prisoners but still heavy with what it has contained. Not all prisoners are evacuated at once. Some remain behind, assigned to dismantle evidence, destroy records, erase traces of murder. They work knowing their turn will come. Some attempt escape in the confusion. A few succeed. Many are caught and killed. As the marches continue, the distinction between guard and executioner dissolves completely. Death is no longer administered through procedure. It is delivered through exhaustion, starvation, exposure, and bullets fired at will. Bureaucracy collapses into raw violence. Prisoners begin to sense moments of opportunity as the front draws nearer. Guards desert. Columns fragment. Orders become inconsistent. In some places, prisoners are abandoned entirely, left to fend for themselves in frozen landscapes littered with the dead. For those still marching, hope becomes dangerous. Liberation is rumored to be close, but each step feels endless. Bodies are failing faster than armies are advancing. Survival becomes a race against time itself. Some prisoners support one another physically, holding each other upright, sharing the last crumbs of food. These acts cost strength they do not have, yet they persist. Dignity is defended even now. The death marches represent the final logic of Sachsenhausen. When prisoners could no longer be exploited, they were eliminated through motion. The camp no longer needed walls or towers. The road itself became the killing ground. Eventually, the marches dissolve. Some prisoners are liberated by Allied forces along the way, collapsing into the arms of soldiers who struggle to comprehend what they see. Others perish just days, sometimes hours, before freedom arrives. Back at Sachsenhausen, those left behind witness the camp's final days. On April 22, 1945, Soviet troops arrive. They find a place emptied of most prisoners, littered with bodies, ashes, and silence. The model camp stands exposed at last. What remains cannot speak, but it does not need to. The ground is saturated with evidence. The buildings bear witness. The absence itself tells the story. For the survivors, liberation does not bring immediate relief. Bodies are broken. Minds are fractured. The march does not end when the shooting stops. It continues in memory, in scars, in silence. The collapse of Sachsenhausen is not dramatic in the way of battles. There is no final stand, no explosion. There is only abandonment, exhaustion, and the slow unraveling of a system that has devoured too many lives to sustain itself. Yet even in collapse, the camp fulfills its final function. It kills until the last possible moment. And as the roads leading away from Sachsenhausen fill with unmarked graves, the world begins to confront the scale of what has happened, even as the full truth still lies scattered along the paths the prisoners were forced to walk. Chapter 15: Liberation, Justice, and the Legacy of Sachsenhausen. The gates stand open, not in triumph, but in abandonment. No orders echo across the roll call square. No whistles cut the air. The watchtowers loom empty, their windows dark, their rifles gone. When Soviet soldiers enter Sachsenhausen in late April of 1945, they do not find a functioning camp. They find a void, a place that feels recently alive, yet unmistakably dead. The silence is unsettling. Barracks stand half-filled with discarded shoes, bowls, scraps of uniforms. Documents lie scattered, some burned hastily, others left behind in the SS rushed flight. The ground is churned and scarred. Ash clings to corners of the camp, settled into cracks and soil. The absence of prisoners speaks louder than any scream ever did. Those who remain are too weak to cheer. A few thousand prisoners, left behind because they were too sick to march or assigned to final cleanup details, emerge slowly from barracks. Their bodies are skeletal, their eyes hollow. Many cannot stand without help. Liberation arrives not as a moment of joy, but as a fragile realization that the killing has finally stopped. Soviet medics move quickly, shocked by what they see. Typhus spreads through the camp. Starvation has destroyed immune systems. Even rescue is dangerous now. Food must be introduced slowly, carefully, or bodies will fail under sudden abundance. For some, liberation comes too late. They die days after freedom, their bodies unable to recover. The soldiers walk through Station Z. They see execution devices, gas chamber remnants, crematorium ovens, piles of ash. The clinical efficiency of death is unmistakable. This is not the chaos of battle. This is something colder, something planned. Word spreads quickly. Journalists arrive. Investigators follow. Sachsenhausen becomes evidence. Survivors testify, their voices weak but resolute. They describe roll calls that lasted hours, the shoe testing track, the executions disguised as medical exams, the endless labor, the fear that never slept. For many survivors, speaking is almost as painful as silence. Words feel inadequate. Memories surface in fragments, sharp and overwhelming. Yet they speak anyway, because forgetting feels like another kind of death. The world listens, but struggles to comprehend. Numbers are cited, estimates debated, tens of thousands murdered, many more broken beyond repair. Sachsenhausen is revealed not as an anomaly, but as a model, a prototype whose methods spread across the continent. Justice comes slowly, unevenly. SS officers are arrested, interrogated, tried. Some face execution. Others receive prison sentences. Many escape accountability altogether, disappearing into the chaos of post-war Europe. The machinery of terror proves easier to build than to dismantle. Former guards claim obedience. Doctors claim research. Administrators claim paperwork. Responsibility dissolves into bureaucracy once again. Survivors watch as the system that destroyed them struggles to judge itself. Sachsenhausen does not close after the war. The site is repurposed by Soviet authorities as a special camp, imprisoning political opponents, suspected collaborators, and perceived enemies of the new order. Suffering continues within the same fences, under different uniforms. The ground absorbs more pain. History layers itself without pause. Only later does Sachsenhausen begin its transformation into a memorial. Barracks are preserved, exhibits constructed, names recovered when possible. Silence is given structure, not to sanitize the past, but to confront it. Survivors return, decades later, walking paths they once marched under threat of death. They stand where roll calls took place. They look at the towers from the outside. Some speak, others cannot. Memory behaves differently in each body. For the world, Sachsenhausen becomes a warning etched into geography. It shows how terror does not require madness. It requires organization. It shows how cruelty thrives when it is framed as duty, as necessity, as efficiency. The camp's legacy is not only in its death toll, but in its example. Sachsenhausen taught the SS how to run camps, how to train guards, how to classify victims, how to normalize violence through routine. It was the prototype, and prototypes are dangerous precisely because they are meant to be improved. Modern visitors walk through the camp under open skies. Birds sing where gunshots once echoed. Grass grows where prisoners collapsed. The contrast is jarring. Peace feels almost inappropriate. Yet it is necessary, because memory cannot exist only in horror. It must exist in reflection. The legacy of Sachsenhausen forces uncomfortable questions. How easily can institutions abandon morality? How quickly can neighbors become spectators? How often does efficiency override conscience? There are no simple answers, only lessons learned at unbearable cost. The survivors carry Sachsenhausen with them for the rest of their lives. In scars, in nightmares, in moments of silence that arrive without warning. Liberation did not erase the camp. It ended its operation, but not its presence. As time passes, witnesses grow fewer. Memory shifts from testimony to history. This is the most dangerous moment. When the voices fade, the structures remain, stripped of urgency unless deliberately remembered. Sachsenhausen stands today not only as a site of mourning, but as a measure of how far a society can fall when ideology replaces humanity, a measure of how ordinary systems can produce extraordinary evil. The camp did not begin as a place of mass murder. It became one, step by step, decision by decision, form by form. That is its most chilling lesson. What happened here was not inevitable. It was built, and because it was built once, it can be built again anywhere vigilance fails. Sachsenhausen does not ask for pity. It demands remembrance. It demands responsibility. The gates remain open now, not as an invitation, but as a warning. This is where terror was perfected, and this is where the world must remember how easily perfection can become catastrophe.